Good evening, everybody. I'm super excited about tonight for a couple reasons. I have a huge announcement that I am making about the future of some live broadcasts that we're going to be doing here on Wind Conductor's YouTube channel and also on Facebook. It's going to be phenomenal, and I'm super excited to share that with you guys tonight. But also, you know, this week I read through there's a new article in the Journal of Research and Music Education that every band director, you really should need to take the time to read this article. It is spot on. Dr. Phillip did some research back in May of last year, talking to some really phenomenal band directors about some of their successes, some of their trials, and compiled this research into an article that was just published this month in the journal. So I actually met with him yesterday. We had a little conversation, had an interview. It is phenomenal. He has some great insights. He's got some great ideas about, what to do next and all that other stuff. So that's going to come up a little bit later. Before we get started, I definitely want to encourage you guys to check out our site, winconductor.org. We try to stay relevant with things that are pertinent to the band community, and I would love for you guys to come over there and check out some of our articles, watch some of our videos. We try to tackle some of the issues that we're dealing with in the band room. So definitely check those out. We've got a lot of great articles and interviews on the website. You can check those out there. And I would be remiss if I did not tell you about Amano Music. Amano Music is what makes all of this possible. We are a collective of composers. We've got works for all different levels of bands. We've got resources for bands, everything from beginning to advanced level, some old, revised, contemporized marches, classic marches and stuff like that, as well as some holiday music, some marching band resources and stuff like that. Definitely check out Amano Music. I would be very grateful. The composers that I work with would be extremely grateful. And, all of this is from the support that you guys give us. So, big announcement. So many of you, there's so many bands across the United States are familiar with the Teaching Music Through Performance and Band series. This series has had a huge impact on the band community. And in 2 weeks, we are going to interview. I need to get a drum roll ready for this. We're starting up a brand new series of interviews called Maestro Moments. And our first interview is with one of my favorite conductors, Eugene Corcoran. He's coming on February 18th at 8 p.m., same time. We're going to talk about his impact on the band community through his recordings, through the Teaching Music Through Performance series, as well as kind of learn a little bit more about him, his journey, his path, and talk about some of the other recordings that he's done throughout his career that have had a huge impact. I've been, some of my favorite recordings come out of that North Texas band with Eugene conducting. So I'm really looking forward to talking with him. 2 weeks after that, in beginning of March, we are going to talk with Alfred Watkins. Alfred Watkins, phenomenal band director. He was the director of bands at Lassiter High School for 31 years. Now, Alfred has a career that any of us would, kill for. I mean, it was just absolutely phenomenal. His bands were competed in the Grand National Championships, won the championships in 1998 and 2002. He won 9 BOA regional championships. His band marched 4 times in the Tournament of Roses, 3 times in the Macy's Parade. He's performed several times at Midwest. Just an amazing band director and educator. And I am really looking forward to that. So that is going to happen in 4 weeks from tonight on March 4th. So be sure to mark your calendars, check that out, and join us that night as we talk those 2 nights. Moving forward, we're hoping to do more of these on every 2 weeks or so. I've been talking to some great composers, band directors, conductors, really trying to find a way to, you know, create a resource for us to go and kind of dig into what makes these band directors successful. How did they create this culture of success with their programs? And hopefully, it's something that we can all glean and take some information home and use in our own band programs. So tonight, I am honored to present an interview I did yesterday morning with Dr. Phillip Hash. He was not unable to be live tonight because he is actually right now at the Illinois State Music Educators Conference doing a clinic with them for Illinois. So I totally understand that. But he mentioned something in the interview, and I just wanted to kind of point it out before we get into that and start that interview. The Journal of Research in Music Education, the SAGE site, is actually offering his article for free. You know, most of the times with the JRME, you have to have a subscription to read those. And but for this article, because it is so pertinent to what is happening right now in the U.S. and around the world, they have actually made that article available for free download. You can go over to their site, click on the download the PDF, and you can get a copy of that article. And I highly, highly encourage you. This article, as you can see, I was making a lot of notes, highlighting stuff, and just got a lot out of it. But let me stop talking about that, and let's go ahead and get into our interview with Dr. Hash. Phil, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this publication that just came out in JRME. Tell us a little bit about the study and how it came about. What was behind? What was the impetus for you moving into this study and trying to put this information out?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. As everybody knows, last spring with the pandemic and COVID-19, most schools went to virtual learning, and in some classes that can work. I don't think it's ideal in any class, but in, say, a U.S. history class, a teacher, I think, can make that work. In a band class, choir, orchestra class, it's something we've never even thought about or would even conceive of being possible. And nonetheless, directors all over the country found ways to make it work. And the goal of the study was to figure out, exactly what directors were doing, what some of their concerns were, what some of the challenges were, just to kind of start a line of research on this idea of remote learning. I waited until May to do the survey in order to allow people to go through the process of remote learning so that they would have more to talk about when they completed the survey. But I really wanted to figure out, what are people doing? And it was something I think a lot of people were interested in. And the Journal of Research in Music Education was terrific about expediting the publication. Typically, things aren't published this quickly in academic research, but because it was such a timely topic, the editor, Peter Mixa, was willing and able to, to expedite the process.
Yeah, and you said a couple of things there that I just wanted to kind of highlight. The music education community has really stepped up their game with trying to address what's going on during the pandemic and during the closures. And we see it not just in the classroom. The band directors have been phenomenal. I've talked with so many different band directors about what they're doing, what's been working, what hasn't worked, and stuff like that. And it's, as an educator myself, I'm just amazed at the resiliency of the band director community. I mean, it's you give us a problem, and we find solutions to make it work in our programs. And I think it's, everybody talks about, wish we could have that, wish we could do that, and all that other stuff. And in the band community, we work with small budgets, and we put on these phenomenal shows. We work with small staff, and we have these incredible programs. So I mean, it's inherent within the band community to get the job done and give these kids an amazing experience. And this is just shining a light on the amazing work that band directors are doing. But on top of that, thinking about the music education community as a whole, you mentioned JRME, and they were, they quickly hopped on top of this because this issue is important, it's relevant, it's happening now, and we need to have a plan of attack for moving forward because we don't know, how long this is going to be. Some people are saying it could, we may be back to normal in a few months. Some are saying, no, it's going to be a year or more. I mean, the opinions are all over the place. And I love the fact that, all around, you got composers that have dropped everything that they're doing and created these new works that are adaptable for these small groups to be used in these opportunities here. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that, and maybe some of your thoughts and stuff on those.
Oh, well, and I agree 100%. And I think that there's things that we're going to learn about our ability to teach and some things that actually work that we'll carry forth after the pandemic is over. And you're right. I remember when this whole thing started, we said, well, we're going to close campus for 2 weeks,
right,
let it dissipate. We'll come back. It was nothing like that. And we thought, well, by the summer, we'll start to kind of get back to normal. Now we're talking about the fall, and I just saw the SMTE conference, the Society for Music Teacher Education, is doing their conference virtually in September. Wow. So, I think this is going to go on longer than we think, until people are vaccinated, until the numbers are really, down to nothing. So we're going to need to continue to be innovative. And you mentioned a couple things. Directors using the flex band scoring, composers who have taken their own music and made it for flexible ensembles.
Yeah.
And pandemic or not, there's a lot of small school bands out there that can really find this useful. And much of this music is really some of the masterworks, and it's the composers themselves who have altered it and arranged it for a different, instrumentation. And I think that's going to be useful for us for a long time. I think there. Well, excuse me?
No, that's a good point because we from a compositional standpoint, we write for a full concert band, but when you look at across the spectrum of band, there's a lot of schools that don't have a full instrumentation, and they have small programs. They may be building. There may be there could have been a split in the district that they're teaching, and their band programs are split in half. And now they have this huge resource moving forward with these flex band arrangements. And prior to this, the flex band arrangements were geared towards less experienced musicians, and they were kind of watered down a little bit, but these
right.
are phenomenal pieces.
Yeah, and I would agree that the flex bands have been around for a long time, but most of that repertoire, goes through maybe the grade 3 level, and that's about it. There's just so much more available now. I think another thing that we've probably figured out is how can we teach band online?
Right.
So, if I'm a school band director and I want to do a summer band, and work with individual students and give individual lessons, that's something that I could do without students having to come into school, without me having to go into school. I could do an online lesson. I can think if you're a director in a small rural community, there's just a lot of advantages to that. Or if you have a student that's going to have a prolonged illness, that student can Zoom into class and still participate in some way in that learning experience. I think, we talk about going back to normal. I don't think the normal is going to be what it looked like before, that there's going to be some habits that we've picked up and some strategies we've picked up for teaching that I think we'll keep, which is, I think, a good thing.
Nah, and that's insightful. And I've kind of mentioned this in several interviews that I've done, that I firmly believe that we are in the midst of a forced evolution of the approach that we have in the music classroom. And there are going to be things that we are going to shove aside once we're able to have in person. And nothing, I don't see anything replacing that in person. And I'm just putting that out there. I'm not
Oh,
advocating that this is going to happen.
agreed.
But we are going to see elements of this last for a long time.
Hmm.
And positive things, not just the compositions that we have, but the interaction, bringing in guest artists to come work with our band that we didn't even consider in the past, but now we realize the technology that's here and is bringing a lot of advantages to the music education classroom. So, well, let's go ahead and talk about your study because you really brought to light a lot of things that are happening. And, you know, tell us a little bit about the study itself, and what were some of the big positive takeaways that you got from your study?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I'm going to have to move my cat off of my table here, which is probably not the most professional thing. But I usually just let her stay, but I'd probably be too distracting for that. Um,
That's the beauty of the virtual environment that we're in right now. You actually get a glimpse into like the personal lives of the people that you're working with, which is kind of cool, you know?
Yeah, I think so. Some of the time, most of the
Right.
time. But um, well, so anyway, some of the things that I found. Um, One of the things that I found that was the most useful, I think, was what did successful teachers do? And by successful, I mean teachers who had a high level of participation and a consistent level of participation, where students, were always there and were participating and and involved. And most of the directors in the study met with their students just once a week. And now, like like we talked about, the remote learning today, right now, in the winter of 2021, looks different. It's a school day. People have a band period to report to, but back in the spring, that wasn't the case. And most directors in my study were teaching once a week when they met with students. Some met with them in individual or small group lessons. Some of them met with them in whole group lessons. But those teachers that were most consistent were the ones who met more than once a week, from 2 to 5 days a week with students. So they had that regular contact with them. Um, they were A lot of directors had allowed for choice of assignments, so you can either do this or this. They varied their assignments based on ability level. Um, so I think those successful directors were the ones who had the most contact with their students. The more experienced directors had the higher levels of participation, which might have been because they'd been at the school longer, they had stronger relationships with students, they had more teaching experience, perhaps, was a reason for that. But
Yeah, I found when I was reading, that's actually one of the things that I highlighted in the article when I read through it. And the statement in the article said the finding that almost all directors with higher or more consistent participation had been teaching for at least 6 years might imply that those with experience were better able to adapt to the challenges of remote learning. And it it kind of highlighted to me how how important it is for the experienced directors to reach out to those younger directors to help them out. Because uh, I think back to my younger days when I was teaching, and I was blessed. My first teaching assignment, I taught for a year in South Carolina, and I was the middle school band director and an assistant high school band director, but I got to work with Steve Rogers down at Chesterfield High School in South Carolina, and we did a lot of team teaching that first year, and I got to work hand in hand with a great educator, had a phenomenal band program at the high school, very well respected, and I learned so much in that year, a lot more than I did in my student teaching experience. Not that I mean, I worked with Benji Springs with my student teaching, and he was phenomenal. He was a great guy and phenomenal director. But having that close interaction, and I think, now that we have a pandemic like that, your study just brings to light how important it is for, you know, the veteran teachers to kind of reach out to some of those young band directors.
Well, absolutely. And one of the questions I asked was, what was your source of, professional development or support? And colleagues was the number one thing, and we sought help from colleagues that we knew personally. But there were also, we saw these Facebook groups emerge,
Right.
where, directors were networking from all over the country. And there were a lot of directors that were involved in that and asking questions and, using each other as a resource.
Yeah.
So I think we saw a lot of that, working together, and we still see that. Those Facebook groups are still active today, and people are learning from each other. But this is one of the hardest times for experienced directors to, take time and reach out to those younger directors, because they themselves are learning how to do this. And, there's some other realities about this pandemic for band programs. And I think there's going to be a lot of band programs that suffer quite a bit when this is over. It's going to be kind of like coming out of the house after a tornado and start looking around at the damage and picking up the pieces.
Right.
So many directors are talking about, go ahead.
No, let's go ahead and flesh that out a little bit. What do you, in the survey and in the interactions that you've had with these directors, what are some of the concerns post-pandemic once we open up? What are they seeing as being the damage from, using your analogy, the damage from the tornado of COVID-19? What are some of the things that they're anticipating having to deal with?
Well, one of the questions I asked was, what were some of your concerns during remote teaching? And one of the biggest concerns was maintaining students' well-being. That directors put that for a pretty high priority during that time. But one of the things that they talked about was for next year was retaining and recruiting students for next year.
Yeah.
And so they knew, so look what we've taken away when we go to online learning. We've taken away the social aspect of band. We've taken away performances. We've taken away traveling. Other research shows that students are in band, for musical reasons, that it's important that they have a really good musical experience, that matters. It's not all about fun and social, but, on the other hand, the other half of that is that it is a social experience. And when we take that away, and add the pressures of remote learning to students and to families, we find that band is the thing that they are pulling away from. And I know just anecdotally, directors are saying, I can think of one that said, I had 35 in my band, now I'm down to 13.
Wow.
And those things that's not unusual at all. And especially for a program that was maybe struggling or just starting to develop
Right.
before the pandemic, what's going to happen to those programs? Next year, when there's 5 kids in high school band, our administrator is going to say, we're not going to have that class. Or I think what we'll see in some larger schools is we had 3 concert bands, now we're going to have 2. We really don't know what the fallout of that is going to be. But I know a very successful director who said, that they're concerned about, their numbers for next year. And other directors need to be terrified, because this particular program is one that has played at Midwest and there are state conferences and that sort of thing. It's something that everyone is going to be affected by. And that's where, that flex band music we talked about, and some of those kinds of strategies that we are developing now, we're still going to need after this whole thing is over and we start having to figure out, well, how can we, how are we going to build back these programs?
Kind of on that, I actually had recently talked with an administrator that I know about what's going on, and that's been a huge concern to me. For me is the retention and growth of the program post COVID. What's going to look like and stuff like that, and in talking with him, he actually talked about what is happening across the full spectrum, which as a band director, we don't really dig into that as much. And it was disheartening, but also at the same time, it was a little reassuring about where we're going to be. One of the tragedies that is happening right now in education as a whole, I'm not talking about just music education, is, we're seeing failure rates skyrocket in the general education classes, those science, math,
Right.
English, all those classes, their failure rates are skyrocketing, and it's not because of poor teaching or anything like that. It is just the experience of COVID. So, as an administrator, he was saying, next year or whenever, those are things that these students need for graduation. And from an administration point of view, one of the things that they're looking at for their school is, you know, having the teacher resources to cover those core classes that the kids need to graduate. The teachers that some of the other electives and stuff like that may not, and I'm talking about the electives within that larger umbrella of the science, math, English, and stuff like that. There's not going to be as many students available to take that because they're repeating their core classes. The bright side for us is that we still are going to have our core, but those kids are going to need to have the electives. So those that may have dropped out of the program, they're not going to have as many opportunities outside of the traditional performance-based electives. So they're going to be, looking at us to kind of fill out our schedules and fill out our programs. So, post-COVID, it was kind of reassuring to me that, reassuring and, oh my goodness, I'm going to have a flood of kids that haven't played in a year or two, but they're going to be they're going to be looking for places like band, choir,
Right.
and orchestra to kind of fill out their schedule and stuff like that. They're not going to have as many open opportunities because, the staff is going to be overwhelmed with the kids that have to get those graduation requirements.
Right. My wife is actually an associate principal of a high school, and they're facing the same kinds of things with failure rates and those sorts of things. And I agree. I think that the money is tight. Schools have spent a lot of money to make their buildings safe by investing in PPE and plexiglass barriers and filtration devices for classrooms and all of those kinds of things that are necessary. And you're right, they're going to need to figure out ways for students to have credit recovery. And we could see that cutting into the fine arts programs, especially if we don't have the enrollment. And I think that we as directors, as teachers, are going to have to be proactive in going after those students who have dropped.
Yeah.
And said, I know you dropped, and we really would, you were an important part of the band program, and we really want you to come back and join us again. There's some research out there that where some survey research where students have said, yeah, I quit, and no one ever come to talk to me about it. The director never come to ask me, why did I quit? Or, well, what can we do to, which was always surprising to me when I was teaching before I went into higher education. I had things set up that if you wanted out of band, you needed a lawyer. It just wasn't going to be that easy. And I was going to call your parents, and I was going to talk to you, and, no matter who the student was.
Right.
I think we always take it personally when a student drops. I know I did, and that never went away in my 14 years of teaching school bands. So I always followed up, but I know a lot of directors that just don't necessarily do that, and I think that's what we're going to have to do to get these students back into our music programs. Going to band, orchestra, choir, that's a habit, that's a routine. And once students get out of that routine, it's unlikely that they're going to come back on their own.
Right. Right. So Getting back into the study a little bit, there was there were a couple of concerns that were kind of highlighted in the study, and a lot of it kind of dealt with the equity issues and
Mhm.
on a broader spectrum of the socioeconomic, not just the economic aspect, but the social aspect of that socioeconomic spectrum there. And, quoting from the article that you published, you mentioned other factors that could have hindered participation included student access to internet due to multiple people needing to use a single computer, student obligations in caring for younger siblings, which were, as schools are still shut down, and but parents are starting to go back to work. We're seeing a lot more of that popping up now.
Mhm.
Parents not allowing their child to play an instrument while other family members were working or schooling from home, and also the student access to instruments, music, and related supplies. And I just wanted to, th- these were observations that were made in May. Have you kind of reached out to some of the directors that participated in the survey to kind of see what they were doing to kind of overcome some of these challenges that they looked at back then? And have you found any good
Yeah,
resources?
so I have not done a follow-up study in that way.
Okay.
Um, uh, so I don't know if, I don't know how they're overcoming those things. And of course, those challenges are especially true in underserved communities.
Right.
Um, I have a student teacher right now who's out in a school district that has a lot of underserved students, and this student teacher is teaching strings over Zoom, beginning strings over Zoom, but students can't have their cameras on because of bandwidth issues. So if every student turns their camera on, everybody freezes. So I can't imagine trying to teach strings without being able to see it.
Right.
Um, so those kinds of challenges, it's not always just a matter of students don't want to turn their cameras on, although that's sometimes the case. But in rural communities where internet access is spotty, it's really difficult to have a group lesson of some kind. So I think that for underserved populations, there's a lot of problems that just compound each other, and the ones that you just read from my study are things that directors had mentioned in some of the narrative data that I collected but didn't use in that particular article. Um, that there's responsibilities for caring for younger siblings. They've got to they've only got one computer and it's not very good. There's some school students who are trying to do this on their phone.
Right.
Um, so how do we overcome that? I think we have to find ways of providing internet access to those underrepresented students. Some I've heard some people say, should the internet be a public commodity like electricity? Should it be something that or something that's available to everybody? And that's a different discussion. But if we're going to
But
continue with
it's
this kind of learning, go
yeah,
ahead.
that is a discussion that definitely needs to happen because I mean I think that is one of the things that is coming to light in the 21st century. We're realizing how important it is for this type of technology to be available to everybody. Just like in the beginning of the 20th century, they
Right.
realized the importance of electricity in the homes and stuff like that. You know, I, and and I'm not trying to get political in any way, but I mean these are things though that we can talk about within our local communities. And I've always been an advocate that the first place to look for change is within the community around you.
Mhm.
Don't wait for the federal system to kind of come in and save the day. Uh, Talk with your local representatives. Talk with your school board members. Talk with your elected county supervisors. What can we do as a small community to help the people that live there and stuff like that?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and other issues, for students, especially maybe in Title I schools, urban schools, the rural schools that are supplying instruments to students, is that those students might be sharing an instrument with somebody, so they
Right.
didn't have access to an instrument. Um, uh, one of the concerns teachers had was parental support. Now, this wasn't necessarily an underrepresented community issue, but it was an issue for everybody. Is that parents are feeling a lot of pressure of all the kids being home and trying to learn on online and work from home, and band was just the thing that's like, we just what, we're going to have to let this go in light of everything.
Right.
And I think we're going to be feeling that impact for some time in our profession, and we already see it. Publishers their sales are down, music instrument sales are down, so it's affecting the industry. We might see teachers released if they're not needed in their schools, although we don't know. Some teachers have retired or are planning to retire, so that might balance out. We just, like I said, when it's all over, we're gonna have to walk outside and survey the damage and start picking up the pieces.
Most definitely. So the study that you wrote, the article mentioned a couple of activities that were successful in the different band programs that you interviewed that responded. So what were some of the activities that you found to be most successful in the remote learning area?
I think that the directors who had the high and consistent participation focused on individual musicianship. So, and a lot of directors, understood that working on band music maybe isn't the priority right now. And actually, we've seen a lot of virtual choirs, right?
Yeah.
There weren't very many directors who used virtual bands in the study that I did, which was just in Illinois, by the way. This was not a national study for a particular reason. But so I think focusing on individual musicianship, doing small or individual lessons rather than trying to do whole band lessons worked. Teaching music theory concepts, which is something that we probably don't do enough of anyway, but that was something that was conducive for online teaching. Finding ways for students to listen and respond to music, for example, to listen to a professional on their instrument and to compare their own playing to that. Bringing in guest speakers is something that people did, and I've done a few of those things. Zoom just makes that a lot easier. So a lot of directors engaged in those kinds of activities. I think there are some activities that directors could also explore, like composing and arranging music, putting students together for small collaborations. So, putting together a virtual band, as we were talking about before we started, it can be expensive, but it's going to take a lot of time.
Yes.
It might be easier for two students to work together to create a duet rather than to try to do something with the full ensemble.
And I will, on that virtual band front, I do want to kind of highlight one of my successes that I had with my jazz program. We actually did one of these jazz band, virtual bands projects with them where we recorded a piece of music. And I used a reduced instrumentation. I did one of the Hal Leonard, 6-horn charts and just kind of doubled up parts and stuff like that just to make it work. But I had a student that was really into video editing and came up to me and said, "Hey, I wouldn't mind taking a stab at it, and maybe I can edit in a clip of that." But I was just amazed that this student, on his own time, put together this beautiful collage of the students playing. I sent him the videos. He put it all together. I did the audio editing because it's kind of in my wheelhouse. But, in that, I had one of my students come up to me who's really big into creating electronic music, is very familiar with the digital audio workstations, the recording software and stuff like that. Moving forward, I'm going to be reaching out to that student to do like a smaller scale, give them a quintet or a octet or something like that that's feasible that he can work with and kind of balance out and get that experience. And don't overlook the resources that you have within your band program, because a lot of these kids are going out and experimenting with GarageBand. They're experimenting with Adobe Premiere or whatever the the web-based version of it is, or they're digging into some of these things because they are really into the audio and video editing, which, people from my generation, that you try to get me to put together 20 videos or 30 videos or 50 videos like we did with the marching band. I'm like, no, there's no way I could do that. Um, but some of these kids, so you know, don't be afraid to have this be a learning moment and an experience moment. These kids, I'm so thrilled that this kid gets to put that jazz band performance on his resume when he's looking at colleges to go and say, hey, this is what I did in high school.
Yeah, and think about, you know, maybe we're trying to do some new things like what you just described, and maybe we're going to reach some students who aren't excited about practicing,
right,
and aren't excited about going to contest, but all of a sudden you say, could you help me put together this with using digital audio workstation? Oh yeah, that sounds awesome.
yeah.
Why don't you and a couple of your friends get together and work on this quartet and do a virtual thing, and we might find ways that are going to make band more interesting for students and maybe get us away from the routine of what we always do, and to do some things that maybe are a little bit more individual focused, incorporate technology, maybe incorporate popular music, and reach some of those students that maybe aren't excited about the typical traditional kinds of things we do. This experience might help us to realize that.
Yeah.
And I hope that when it's all over and we get back to whatever normal is going to be, that we stop for a minute and think critically about our practices in the past and think, do I really need to go back to that? Do we, and not just directors thinking about it, but administrators, community members, and students, do we have to play at every boys and girls basketball game? Do we really have to go to contest? What if instead of going to band contest for a rating, we had everyone go to solo and ensemble contest and took some time to have students work on quartets and duets and solos and that sort of thing? Is this something we have to do? What if we went to contest for comments only and didn't worry about the rating, and pushed ourselves and took some risks? This is an opportunity for us to rethink what we've been doing in band for 100 years. And maybe it's time that we look at some other opportunities, like the ones that we've, like the opportunity you just described, or the chance for students to, listen and respond to music. And I think most importantly, to focus on individual musicianship, which is what the successful directors are doing, by the way. And the ones who have done that are making an investment in the future. They might find, we assume that our ensembles are not going to be very good when we get back. I'm not sure that's necessarily true for all directors. Some might find that their students are sounding pretty good because they focused on that individual musicianship that we might not always focus as much on when we're so concerned about ensemble performance.
Yeah. Wow. That is probably one of the greatest summaries of our conversation. So I am going to go ahead and let that to be the conclusion of today. And Phil, I want to thank you so much, first and foremost, for taking the time to undertake a study like this. It is needed. It is very, very relevant to what's happening today. And your article, I want to encourage everybody to, if you don't have the Journal of Research in Music Education, it is a great resource. And, I know a lot of, it's not always the most fun read because it is a very educational approach and research-based approach to things. But some of those articles in there are so relevant. And if anything, go and read Phil's article on this. He really brought out some and highlighted some concerns that are in there, highlighted some possible solutions, and highlighted some of the successes of other band directors. And for me as a band director, it was a great read. I really enjoyed it, and I just want to say thank you so much for providing that service for our community.
Well, thank you very much for having me and for letting me talk about the study today. And I will mention that even if you don't have a subscription to the Journal of Research in Music Education, and even if you're not a member of the National Association for Music Education who publishes the journal, that particular article has been made available by the publisher, by Sage, as open access, meaning that anyone can download and read that article. So if you just go, put Journal of Research in Music Education in Google, that website will come up. Go to the current issue in the January 2021 issue, and you can download and read that article for free.
That's awesome. That's great. That's fantastic. Well, Phil, how can people find you? What is the best way for them to, if they wanted to reach out and maybe do one of the virtual guests for their classroom and stuff like that? If that's something that you want to do, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Email is probably the best way. PMHash at ilstu.edu.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for coming on and joining us and sharing your research with us.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to just publicly thank Dr. Hash again for coming on and taking the time to just share some comments with us. A lot of great things, and I really encourage you guys to go check out that article. It is some really great research, really good insight into what's happening right now. And, come back and visit this video and hear some of the suggestions that were successful in some of the band programs in Illinois. Be sure to check us out in 2 weeks as we interview Eugene Corporon from University of North Texas, talking about recordings, his experiences within the band world. Really looking forward to that. So I look forward to seeing you guys in a couple weeks. Thanks a lot. You guys have a great one.